Following the resurgence of French divisions in northern Spain, Napoleon had seemed to achieve redemption from his original defeat to the forces of Britain, Spain, and Portugal. British morale at this point was very low, and some politicians, along with a portion of the public, demanded that not one more man should be sent and the peninsula should be left to defend itself, which at the time was very understandable, considering the gruesome retreat in the winter over the mountains of Galicia had left the army in a poor and vulnerable state. The British army wasn't the only commodity that was vulnerable. Both Spain and Portugal were facing the direct consequences to the revolt a year prior. Urged on by a masterly strategic analysis provided by Sir Arthur Wellesley, the British cabinet determined to continue to oppose Napoleon in the peninsula. This was the first European theater where there was a spark of national opposition to the European dictator and his new order, and they hoped that British support in Iberia might reanimate opposition to Napoleon throughout Europe. In the aftermath of the Convention of Sintra, Sir Arthur Wellesley, his name cleared, was reappointed to lead Britain's army in another chance to help rid Europe of the seemingly invincible Napoleon. Lisbon was still free from French control and became the base of British operations when Wellesley returned, now with Portuguese allies under the command of William Beresford. Soult crossed into Portugal in the spring of 1809, but was defeated again by Wellesley at Oporto on the 12th of May. Wellesley now advanced into Spain with Spanish allies who proved unreliable. When Marshal Victor and Joseph Bonaparte attacked at Talavera on the 28th of July, 1809, they took no active part in the battle at all. Despite this, Wellesley defeated the French, but determined not to make Moore's mistake, retreated back into Portugal until he could be sure of his Spanish allies and was better prepared. For Talavera, Wellesley became known as Wellington as his reward, but would not become a duke until 1814. The remains of the Spanish army were forced back to defend Cadiz as the free capital of Spain, while Wellington prepared defenses in Portugal for the expected French invasion. These became known as the Lines of Torres Vedras. In early 1810, two French armies were on the border, the Army of Portugal under Marshal André Massena and the Army of Andalusia under Marshal Soult. Soult was an incredibly decorated general, being one of only 6 officers in French history to receive the distinction of Marshal General of France, and was even named General of the Empire in 1804. Marshal André Massena the same, having earned his reputation as a very effective and dedicated divisional commander in Italy. The personal dislike both men had for each other prevented any coordinated action. In July 1810, Massena advanced and was defeated by Wellington at Busaco on the 27th of September. Wellington refused to be drawn out from his defenses by this victory, and Massena's forces spent a long, harsh winter starving outside the British and Portuguese lines. Despite unsuccessful French attempts to retake Cadiz by 1811, the situation in the peninsula had changed very little. Wellington defeated Massena again at Fuente de Ñoro in May of 1811, and the Allied army under Beresford attacked the border fortress of Badajoz with little success and much butchery. Elsewhere, Spanish regulars and irregulars suffered setbacks at the hands of the French, including their defeat at Valencia on the 9th of January 1812. Proving once again that insurgents have little chance of repelling invaders until they are able to fight and win a conventional war. In January of 1812, Wellington decided that it was the right time to go on the offensive. First, he took the 2 border forts which were the gateway to Spain, Ciudad Rodrigo on the 19th of January and Badajoz on the 19th of April. Lacking any real siege train or the time to reduce the fortresses through starvation, these were taken by bloody assaults. Wellington continued to make his name defeating Massena's replacement Marshal Marmont at Salamanca on the 22nd of July. Madrid was briefly liberated, but the lack of siege train this time made taking Burgos impossible, and Wellington retreated back to Portugal rather than risk being cut off by the superior French forces. Although forced back into Portugal, the Peninsular War had turned in favor of the British. Wellington had made his reputation, smashing all the French marshals and armies sent against him, and just as importantly, Napoleon had drained Spain of the best of the French forces for the invasion of Russia. Napoleon had expected to return to Spain after the Russians had been dealt with and crush the British forces. but of course few of his troops returned from the failed invasion of Russia. In 1813, Wellington led a much more confident Allied army into Spain, once again facing Joseph Bonaparte, and once again smashing the French army, this time at the Battle of Vittoria on the 21st of June, 1813. Marshal Suchet tried to hold the mountain passes, but after several hard-fought engagements, Wellington's army entered France. Wellington's army drove northwards, defeating Soult at Orthez in February 1814 and capturing Bordeaux. The last battle of the Peninsular War was fought at Toulouse on the 10th of April, 1814, where Soult was once again defeated. Sadly, this was a pointless battle and wasted many lives needlessly as Napoleon had abdicated on the 6th of April, 1814, but the news had yet to reach the combatants in the south. The Peninsular War proved to be a fatal drain to Napoleon's resources, both in his time and in men and materials. It also helped forge a British army capable of beating the French and prove British commitment to the war against Napoleon to the European allies throughout this turbulent period. Most importantly, it brought to the fore one of the great generals of the period, the Duke of Wellington. Although it is important to note that Wellington and Napoleon never fought against each other during this campaign. That would have to wait until the 100 Days campaign and Napoleon's last desperate gamble. Thank you for watching this Everything History video. What do you make of the Peninsular War? And what would you like us to cover next? Let us know in the comments below.